Some changes to the Pelicans are maybe calming down. Zion Williamson staying put. While others, a Hall of Famer is out, are heating up. We'll try and make sense of a crazy news day. Plus, let's take a look at Dereck Lively II for a very specific reason. It's Friday's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider Credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Friday, final show of the week, and we had a crazy news day for the Pelicans, which maybe clarified some things, but muddied the waters with some others. So we'll try and make sense of that before looking at Dereck Lively II, a center prospect out of Duke. And I have a specific reason for bringing him up, and I'll let you know what that is in the third segment of today's show. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday. No one else comes to y'all like this, completely free, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So make sure it is your first listen and, of course, become an everydayer if you want to support the show. That's the number one thing you can do alongside commenting down below on YouTube. What do you think of the news that Teresa Witherspoon is out as an assistant coach for the Pelicans? Does that point to something? Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans also brought to you by the Gametime app. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So it was reported both by ESPN and the Athletic Shams and Will Guillory, and then Woj and Andrew Lopez, I think Lopez had it first, that Teresa Witherspoon is out as an assistant coach from the New Orleans Pelicans. This is genuinely a little bit of a shock. Genuinely a little bit of a shock. As she's been with the team for a while, going back to being under Alvin Gentry, and one of the first kind of big hires that David Griffin made to put on the assistant coaching staff. She's an basketball Hall of Fame. It's not an NBA Hall of Fame. It's just the basketball Hall of Fame. She has, quite the track record. And with this team, really seemed to make a connection with a lot of these players, specifically Zion Williamson. And we'll get into him next, because Nick Underhill had a lot of great news and very accurate news on what was going on with Zion that I think kind of helps us see the roadmap for the next week or so from the New Orleans Pelicans. But Teresa Witherspoon, what's this mean, right? I think given her relationship with Zion and Howard Beck, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago and did a profile on Zion Williamson last offseason, looking at all the good changes he made, talked about their relationship and how she was kind of like his closest confidant during last season, which with the foot injury was very difficult on him and for him. And so to lose someone like that, does that mean you're trading Zion? I've seen people say they're taking the kid gloves off with Zion. I don't really think it's anything with that particularly. I think if anything, this was probably, they want a different assistant coach there and they need the space or the budget, whatever it might be, to make that sort of change. I don't know if we really need to read that much into this decision. I think this has less to do with Zion Williamson and more with filling out and building out the coaching staff that they and Willie Green wants. Willie Green inherited basically the entirety of Stan Van Gundy and part of Alvin Gentry's coaching staff. And now this is the first real offseason where there can be some big shakeups and tweaks to that. They're already bringing in Borrego to install a more motion-based offense. Even if I don't think he's like an amazing offensive mind, he clearly can do that, and that's what they're bringing him in to do. So this means there's going to be another shakeup to the staff and maybe more beyond that. So whether this is Willie Green getting to kind of choose his own people, or them simply saying last year wasn't good enough and we need some different minds in the room, I think that's really, truly what we're looking at here. Does this harm the team's relationship with Zion Williamson? Maybe a little bit, but also maybe not. people know that this is a business and you just got to do what you got to do. And sometimes decisions are made that you don't particularly love or like, but you move on. And if, I can't imagine anyone would truly throw a temper tantrum, and demand out or anything like that. That's what it would be over something like this. You might not like it. It might be an unpopular decision, and who knows if it is or not, though the players seem to really absolutely love Teresa Witherspoon. You've got to do what you think is in the best interest of your franchise, even if it's an unpopular move. And I don't think, letting an assistant coach go, which happens all the time in the NBA, is going to have that great of an impact really on anything when it comes to the team. And I don't think this is going to be like, oh, well, they're getting rid of her and they're going to let him go. Nick Underhill reported that David Griffin was meeting with Zion Williamson at the Saints facility, which I made a joke about because you would think they would meet at the Pels facility. And then he literally clarified and said, no, they're meeting at the Saints facility, which in a way is actually relieving to me to get that clarification. It's nice that whoever told him that, and he himself put it out there like that it wasn't, oh yeah, they're meeting today. And it's just like, cool. They're the little step sibling to the Saints, the Pelicans are. So we just refer to everything as the Saints facility. No, they were literally meeting there. And I assume that means that if they were meeting at the Pels facility, it wouldn't have been specifically said the Saints facility. You get the difference there. That's important actually for how people view the franchise, internally there. So it's a bit of a relief. And I think they wanted to just break this news to him in person, which I think is the right thing to do and speaks to that kind of family atmosphere that they try and build there. And it reminds you of when Willie Green went to Devontae Graham's home and spent an hour with him, a year or so ago, to explain to him why he wasn't going to be in the starting lineup anymore, and to try and explain and kind of connect with him more on a human level instead of just being like, I'm the coach, my word is final. You're on the bench now, you're not starting, and leaving it at that. Breaking this news to Zion and not letting him get that news on Twitter, I think is a great thing that this team does, because we hear so many times, look at the live thing with the PGA and golf, when all of those players kind of found out when everyone else did on social media. And that's just not the way to treat people. So doing this and kind of breaking that news to him in the right way, I think is great. But that meeting, as reported by Nick and some of the other things he said, I think shed clarity on where the Pelicans are thinking and heading when it comes to Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram and who could be traded. So more on that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we do that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Birddogs. Birddogs simply make you look good and are like the most functional, good-looking shorts and pants that you can find. The Birddogs stretch khaki short. They're designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and your leg, and it makes your legs look awesome. I've been wearing these all the time, and they look so good that you can wear them out over at the driving range where I've been, and then you can wear them to go have drinks with friends at happy hour. I've gone into a meeting wearing these, casual meeting, and they look great. The Birddog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. So rocking these, you got to give them a try. They got the lining in there. They're a light material. You get them wet, it either bounces off or they just dry really fast. I absolutely love these. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off, we promise you. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Draft coverage, trade coverage. It's been a lot this week, hasn't it? But it does feel like maybe it'll slow down for a second, or we're starting to get some more clarity and there's not as many question marks swirling out there. So make sure Locked On Pelicans is your first listen every day, and of course become an everydayer. For your second listen, you've got to go head over to the Locked On NBA Big Board channel, because we do have our mock draft special, which is out right now. All of our hosts making picks. Go give it a watch. Talk a little bit more about it in the next segment. We'll talk more about it on Monday. I wanted to do that today. Then the Teresa Witherspoon news, I think, is so big that kind of preempted everything. Okay. So do we have more clarity on what's going on around the team? And I think the answer to that is yes. And I think that is a very good thing. And I think this is, if I were doing it, probably the direction that I would go with this as well. And it seems like maybe Zion Williamson will be staying in New Orleans. Per Nick, he had a meeting with David Griffin, and then Gail Benson spoke to him as well, with Gail Benson offering him support and congratulating him on his upcoming child. This is what the narrative around all of this the past week or so really should have been. This is a great moment for Zion Williamson. Becoming a father is awesome, and we should be happy for him, but it got kind of upended with a lot of the social media drama, which is unfortunate. Also, maybe a learning experience and hopefully can be a good thing in the future. And we've seen that becoming a father for NBA players can really help you grow and almost take your career, your life to the next level. Lonzo Ball's a really good example of that. But if they're going to, kind of offer support to Zion, if Gail Benson's going to sit down with him and speak with him and connect with him like that, it feels unlikely that they will trade him. And while they still might be very interested in Scoot Henderson, and if you're an everydayer and you heard yesterday's show, I explained getting a deal done can get done. It's not going to be a very easy thing to do, though, and you shouldn't bank necessarily on a deal getting done. Still might, but the odds certainly would be against it. But if you're going to kind of have this sort of discussion and talk with Zion Williamson, and Nick said, it wasn't really about his future, well, then it probably means you're not trading him and you're keeping him here and you're kind of giving him the support that you need. You don't restructure the performance care staff if you want to get rid of him and if you wanted to keep those guys, and it's more about kind of appeasing him, which I do think that really is. As David Griffin had said in his end of season media availability, it wasn't like they necessarily needed to overhaul all of that. You still can, maybe you still should, they are. But it doesn't mean you have to do that, and he didn't think that that was the biggest problem. So you do this for Zion Williamson. And if you're looking at comparing him and Brandon Ingram, I have said repeatedly on the show, if I were in charge, I would be going down with the Zion Williamson ship. If I get fired for running the team because I stuck with Zion Williamson, he keeps getting hurt, keeps getting injured, just doesn't play or isn't like the true professional you need him to be, then I'm getting fired for that. And I kind of shrug and go, what else was I supposed to do? When you have a guy that is that talented and capable of being an MVP or repeatedly making an all-NBA team, you need that kind of talent to win. Like when you look at the history of NBA champions, it's a star-driven league, and it's like the elite of a star-driven league. That 10-20% of the stars in the league is who you need on your team. Zion can be one of them. I don't think Brandon Ingram will ever be one of those guys. I don't think he's outside. I don't think it's impossible. I think he at times could be a borderline all-NBA guy, third team, but you don't look at Brandon Ingram as a guy that's going to be like, yeah, he'll be MVP. So if you have to choose between them and you're trying to win a title and not just consistently make the playoffs, it's Zion Williamson. The talent is there, and you don't know when you will get someone else with that much talent in the building, even if they're not playing. And so because the ceiling's higher, you potentially go down with the Zion Williamson ship. And it's just really as simple as that. And that's apparently maybe the decision that the Pelicans are going. It also might mean that Brandon Ingram gets moved. It also might mean Brandon Ingram doesn't get moved. But it still very much appears they're going to be in the Zion Williamson business. You can't say that that's the wrong thing to do, even with all the distractions and everything else that comes with all of that. But that's, I think, giving us some clarity that any trade for Scoot Henderson with Charlotte would be centered around Brandon Ingram. And with the draft less than a week away now, we'll see what ends up happening. But I don't think you're going to see Zion Williamson's name really pop up in any more trade rumors. And if they do, that's not really going to be a thing you need to pay attention to. I saw, you see reports and people sending me of he wants out, he's requested. No. If it's not coming from Mark Stein, Woj, or Shams, it's okay. Or one of the local beat writers in Christian Clark, Will Guillory, or Andrew Lopez. Those are the people you need to be paying attention to when it comes to big Pelicans news. There might be some other little things here and there, but anything big, if they're not putting anything out there like that, you don't need to buy into that. And it sounds like the Pelicans might not be even willing to make Zion Williamson available to the Charlotte Hornets. Certainly not to any other team, because this is more about Scoot Henderson than anything else. So I think we've gotten some clarity on that. What we don't have clarity on, but mock drafts are pointing in that direction, of who the Pelicans might take at 14 if that pick doesn't end up getting moved. We've done a number of draft profiles on the show, but there's one guy that I haven't pointed to, which is Dereck Lively II from Duke, that a lot of people are now. I'll explain why I haven't brought him up and why I find this fit a little bit questionable, even if he does make sense in theory, and let you know more about him as a player. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful, and Gametime is the fast and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, theater, and everything near you. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun that you're going to have. Their app is super easy to use, and what I love are the flash deals on tickets for everything. This is great if you're bored on a Friday, a Saturday, any night of the week. Get on the Gametime app and look at how cheap some of these prices are. And all of a sudden, you've got something to do that night and you're going to have a lot of fun. Surprise your partner with an awesome date night that, hey, didn't cost you a whole lot. And it's even cheaper when you download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA because you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off their already cheap prices. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday. No one else comes to y'all like this, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, giving you the insight, trying to read between the lines on a lot of things here. So it's been a busy week. More changes are coming to the Pelicans soon, at least on the assistant coaching staff, and we'll see if they run back the whole roster. But if a deal doesn't get done for Scoot Henderson, well, they're going to have to make a pick at 14 because they're probably not trading that. So who's that going to be? I made a pick, and we'll actually do this on Monday, assuming we get no other big news. So if you're an everydayer, that's coming. What pick did I make in our Locked On NBA mock draft special, which is over on the Locked On NBA Big Board YouTube page and wherever you get your podcast? It's 6 episodes. Our draft experts chime in on the selections that our hosts made. Our host roasts other picks that are made. It's just like this whole big fun event, and I really enjoy it. It's bigger and better than ever before. Locked On's NBA mock draft special. And you can watch it now if you want to know who I made the pick on, and we'll talk about it more on Monday. And how the draft went was kind of interesting, I thought. One person that wasn't really on my big board, and I was watching my picks like go off the board one by one, was Dereck Lively II. And I wanted to do a bit of a mock draft roundup for y'all, and then again, the news today. A lot of them, about 50% of them, had Dereck Lively II, center from Duke, going to the New Orleans Pelicans at 14. And I get it in theory. They need a long-term center. And at 7'1" and 19 years old with a 7'7" wingspan, this guy kind of has the features and tools in terms of athleticism that you want from a modern NBA center. His NBA comp is probably a little bit Mitchell Robinson, a name that many of you have wanted the Pelicans to trade for. But is this the route you actually want New Orleans to go, or that you think the Pelicans really want to go? This is a player that's a rim protector, and that's a big need for New Orleans, certainly. And outside of Wemby, this is probably the best center in the first round, maybe the only true center that'll go in the first round, and he is definitely a shot blocker with just a knack for it. This guy has some feel for the game of just knowing where to be and how to go and defend the rim, and just gets down there, can play defense in the paint and clog it up for opponents. Even if he's not blocking shots, you see him altering shots, which is just as good. He's very good in that way. And with the athleticism he has, he can defend out there on the perimeter. So the Pelicans don't close with Jonas Valanciunas because, well, he can't defend out there on the perimeter. And so they go with Larry Nance Jr., who can switch and can defend in space and isn't as big of a defensive liability for him, even if he's a little undersized and they struggle with rebounding down there. So maybe if you can put a 7'3", 6'1" version of that guy out there, it fixes some of those problems. And again, I think it does that in theory, but he is not an elite rebounder. At 7'1" to average just 5.4 rebounds per game, and his rebounding percentage was low, under 20%, 15.6%. This is not a guy that vacuums up rebounders or that you would even call a good rebounder in college. And it's a little bit surprising. So if he's struggling to rebound in college, is he going to be better at the NBA where everyone's bigger, stronger, faster? And I'm not sure. Offensively, he has shown a flash here and there of being able to stretch his shooting to the 3-point line, but this is a guy who's an interior scorer, but even then, not really much of one. And that can be a good thing. You don't need a high usage center if you, in theory, have Zion Williamson out there, Brandon Ingram or someone else, and CJ McCollum alongside Trey Murphy. You want them taking the shots. You don't need your center taking shots. You want your center just to kind of clean up misses and just put the ball back up and into the hoop. But he doesn't do that. This is a guy, when he gets the rebound, an offensive board, instead of going up and flushing it down, kicks it out and resets the offense. And that's not a bad thing. But if you're there, just throw it down. Make it easy. And maybe the Pelicans want to do that. He can be good in transition. He has the athleticism to get out and run and can finish that way. But I look at him, and it reminds me of just another raw prospect that has a lot of great physical tools. This is a guy who's an above-the-rim finisher who could be a very good lob threat, you would think, in the NBA. But so was Jackson Hayes, and how did that work out? Very unpolished, very raw, freak athlete. Jackson Hayes can go the whole length of the basketball court in 3 steps, it feels like. Dereck Lively II could. But do you want to go through that if it doesn't work out? Or do you want to get someone with this pick that you know for sure will contribute? And this is where it comes down to what I've talked about a lot. Are you drafting for ceiling, or are you drafting for floor and knowing that a guy won't be out of the league and won't be on your team in 4 or 5 years, will contribute even if he's never going to be an all-star player? I think that can be risky in the top 5 of the draft. At 14, for what this Pelicans team needs, even if they run it all back, right? We think they're going to be competitive next year if health is a thing, and let's just assume that it is. So if it is, do you just need another guy who can be in the rotation and can play, which maybe hit shots, handle the ball, whatever it might be? And I think that's the route to go. So I like the idea of Lively II, but I just don't know if that's the right pick at 14 for where the Pelicans are. This isn't about stockpiling talent for New Orleans anymore. They have a lot of that. It's about, assuming they run everybody back, maximizing your roster now because this window exists for this season, maybe next season. That's about it. So go and do that. And that, I think, is the way they need to look at. And I think there's other players that you'd be able to grab here that could do that, or could at least, if you're taking a raw guy, be a position that maybe you put more value on, more emphasis on in the future, a guard position that can eventually maybe replace CJ McCollum when you need to blow up the core of Zion, Ingram, and CJ, assuming you do that in the future and not in the next week. So let me know what you think about Dereck Lively II, because I kind of find it interesting that a lot of mock drafts are having him as a big-time riser up draft boards and getting mocked to the New Orleans Pelicans. It makes sense in theory, but when you think about it a little bit more, does it? And I'm truly not sure that it does. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, this week of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. We'll be back with y'all on Monday to look at the Locked On Podcast Network mock draft exercise. Your team every day. Got to say the tagline. So thank y'all for listening. I'll be back with y'all on Monday.